for decades. And it's just terrible. He would be so ashamed right now. He would be so heartbroken if he came in here and saw all this. I'm sorry.
And this was the second night of protests here in Kenosha. As you mentioned, Neil, all of this started when Kenosha police shot Jacob Blake at least 7 times. Benjamin Crump, an attorney for the Blake family, says that he is still alive, but he is paralyzed from the waist down. He says, we don't know yet if that will be permanent. Crump, by the way, is expected to speak around 4 o'clock Eastern this evening here on the ground in Kenosha in front of that courthouse, which has been at the center of several of the last nights of riots here, but this is what we're seeing. Several buildings like this, Neil, burnt to the ground and businesses destroyed, family legacies gone, and people without a livelihood.
So meaningless. Grady Trimble, thank you very, very much. The read from the former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker joins us right now. Governor, good to have you. Many have said that officials in the state are actually heightening the anxiety around this. The Wisconsin governor, Tony Evers, had issued a statement that seemed to be totally anti-police in support of, like, we don't know the details, but saying that he was shot in the back multiple times in broad daylight. We don't know all the details of the shooting. We do know that body cams and footage like that are not available and won't be available because the officers involved didn't have them. I am curious about his response without knowing for sure the details of this.
Well, the whole thing is just tragic. It's tragic for the Blake family. It's tragic for the law enforcement community in southeastern Wisconsin, Kenosha County, throughout that area. I love Kenosha. I've been there obviously many times as governor, many times before that. What is going to go forward, though, is an independent investigation. In fact, the Wisconsin Department of Justice will be involved in this, and they'll look at whatever other pieces of information beyond just the video that's been so widely viewed across the country. But unfortunately, Democrats like Joe Biden and even Governor Evers here in Wisconsin have seemed to at least leapfrog the entire process, and in a way, I believe, have almost, they didn't do this outright, but they've almost encouraged people to go forward with the writing, which, as we just heard in that segment, is causing incredible damage and harm to the people who live in that very community.
I'm just wondering what happens now. I'm sure, Governor, you got a chance to look at the footage that you saw. It's hard to make sense of what happened and why it happened and the succession with which it happened. But it doesn't look good. And I'm just wondering, where do you think this goes? Because obviously there's planning still more demonstrations. You know how out of hand it got over the last couple of nights. What do you think?
Well, again, I don't want to jump ahead without knowing all the details, and hopefully there's some other footage or some other ways that people can see what happened and what the individual was involved with. Obviously, you could see the gentleman getting into the vehicle, and law enforcement officials, I know over the years, have talked about how very dangerous it is at a time like that. But we'll have to leave that to the people involved in the independent investigation. But I hope people would recognize that where it has been obvious, as it was in Minneapolis with George Floyd, no one came to his defense. And in fact, the prosecutors in that community have charged the former officer who was involved with that. In other cases, sometimes there's pressure, but people look at the facts, they look at multiple pieces of evidence and realize it was justified. I don't know what's going to happen in this case. What I do know is that leaders at the local, state, and at the federal level have to speak out about violence. The rioting does no good. It only causes more harm, more danger. We can make changes. Tim Scott talked about it last night. He had a bill that could have passed on a broad bipartisan basis, the United States Senate. We passed a bill like that years ago here in Wisconsin. I was proud to sign that law. Again, it had broad-based support and independent review that takes it out of the local police department and gives it to an independent body to look into things like this. We need to do more things like that, but we cannot rush to just allow rioters to go forward. And I think the governor here needs to bring out more members of the National Guard, gain control, let the investigation go forth independently, and see where the facts take us.
Governor Scott Walker, thank you very, very much. And we have gotten word that the present governor there has indeed called on the National Guard to help out with this. We don't know the number of troops he's looking at or how much help will be provided, but that he has at least requested. We'll keep an eye on that. Also keeping an eye on states coming out of the COVID-19 virus with, well, some viruses are their own fiscal viruses. They're running huge deficits, and most states, about 44 of them, have to balance the books by the end of the fiscal year. They've changed the fiscal year a little bit in the state of New Jersey, but that doesn't hold off on some of the solutions they're going to have to come up with. And for Governor Murphy there, tax hikes are a big way to do it. In fact, a really big way to do it. Lauren Simonetti following all of that. Lauren.
I got it, Neil. All right, so New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy has just proposed his $32 billion budget. The state legislature has just 1 month to...
This crisis, we find Amy, brought in by her mother.
MSNBC political analyst, and yes, he does work, I think, for, let me make sure I get, you're not on Lincoln Project, you're Republican voters against Trump, right? And get that.
Absolutely.
Get my non-Trump group. There was one form of agreement between, it is getting complicated. It's a more complicated ecosystem these days. I'm going to play for you 2 quotes from 2 speeches last night. One speech last night, 1 speech from the Democratic Convention, Mike, that in some ways shows you that there is some agreement between the 2 parties. Take a...
Global X has expanded their lineup in response to the current environment. So telemedicine
to happen on the left, and I think it's going to be interesting.
This is personal for me.
Texas borderline, and we'll continue to see this potentially become...
I'm going to stop right there to my viewers about all the rioting, which is contrary to peace. Keep in mind, while I was living in Davidson County, I was punished once more for trying to do the right thing, the good thing, and trying to issue out a warning or an advisory that a bloody road ahead was coming. Not just with the school shootings, not just with the church shootings, not just with the entertainment shootings that has occurred either in Colorado or Las Vegas, but now pertaining to all the lootings. This isn't getting serious. This has already gotten serious. Once more, 15 years ago, in 2005, while I was living up in Davidson County, it costed me 48 hours in a psychiatric ward because I had sent the 43rd President of the United States, which is young Bush, a t-shirt that read a bloody road ahead. That t-shirt was used as a threat that was supposed to have been used as an advisory. Instead of the individual that's talking to you right now being taken serious in regards to foreseeing what was fixing to shadow our land, I got punished. I got punished, and I got put into a psychiatric ward for 4 days up in Davidson County while working for a dealership in Nashville, Tennessee, doing auto body work that I basically had over $20,000 worth of work laid out on the floor waiting for me to finish that I done already started on. When you have a government, Homeland Security, and other law enforcement agencies that is this far out in left field to the point that they are not concerned about warning the American people about things that are now coming true. You have a government that has become almost used the word distinct as far as it no longer being beneficial, but you have a government that has become stagnated in its own particular personal policies to the point that it really, the majority of the people that's working in the government and for the government could really care less about seeing these dangers that are now falling upon to the American people. Once more, God had showed me that these occurrences was going to take place in 2020. in 2005. 15 years ago, God had showed me that this stuff was fixing to get bad, pertaining to a bloody road ahead. I could go on and on and on in regards towards events that I have been hijacked into, of events that was supposed to have meant one thing, but the demonic spirits and the wicked, hateful people tried to turn it into something else. We have a society that is blind. We have a society that has been hoodwinked, and at the same time we have a society that is so full of pride, and a government that is so full of pride that it refuses to back up in acknowledging that it has been wrong about a certain individual pertaining to one of their citizens that is now sitting here talking to you. Last week, I seen the scenario building. Others did too, that was familiar with the weather patterns of engaging in two different events that was going to affect once more the American land. The first event we got lucky on, towards it breaking apart and basically just turning into a major rainmaker. This particular event here looks like it's going to be more than a rainmaker. It looks like it's going to be an actual hurricane, which will sustain if it gets up to a category 3. I said if it does, that will exceed 110 mile an hour winds. We already had one hurricane out towards Hawaii. We already had another hurricane that hit the eastern seaboard up towards North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, that went on up into New York, etc., that caused major havoc pertaining to tornadoes and flooding. We've already had a major storm up in, I think, in Ohio. I think that's right. May have been Idaho, where it caused massive agriculture devastation. There was 2 dams that flooded earlier this spring up in Indiana that caused massive flooding. We've had extraordinarily fires out west that has caused, ain't no telling how many billions of dollars in damage. And now we have another hurricane called Laura, L-A-U-R-A, Laura. Almost sounds like Lori. That God only knows how much money that this is going to cost. Between all the natural catastrophes and all the man-made catastrophes, and between the pandemic that was forced upon to us in early January, February of this year, it looks like the year 2020 is going to go down towards being one of the costliest years, either in natural catastrophes or man-made catastrophes, in adding both of them up together, pertaining to the looting and the rioting, etc., that has been going on throughout the countryside. That between both of them combined, as well as the fires, the floods, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, etc., it looks like this is all leaning towards being one of the most costliest years in America history, towards what it's actually costing the American taxpayers in watching these things unfold. Once more, 15 years ago, while me living in Davidson County, I foreseen the things that was unfolding, and I knew that things was drastically going to get worse, to the point of putting out an advisory on a t-shirt that said, "A bloody road ahead." I was punished for putting out that advisory. I was punished for trying to help my people here in the United States of America. And now the proof is in the pudding as far as what is occurring, what has occurred, and yet towards what has yet to occur before it finally wakes up various individuals that was part of this resistance movement that began in 1988 after 9 tapes went to the White House. Oh, what a tangled web that the Americans do indeed weave when first they look and now they realize they've been deceived. As the cost of all of this continues to engulf the American land, it saddens the founder of the Windmill Ministry's heart to no despair in regards towards what that I am observing and seeing firsthand again and again and again. And keep in mind, hurricane season officially don't end until about mid to the latter part of November. We still have September and the vast majority of November to go through, just only on the count of horrendous storms that can form either on one side or the other coastlining areas that can cause damage and devastation. It is so sad that I have tried to break the ice in regards towards a stagnant society that did not want to adhere the truth coming from the Windmill Ministries. Just as of today, I wrote a letter to my cousin Jim Boyd, which is give or take about 5 years older than me, up in Wisconsin, pretty close to where the rioting has broke out for the past 2 nights. Expressing and explaining to him that his generation will go down in history towards being the generation that didn't want to support peace and utopia, that wanted to engage in hostile acts pertaining to violence, abortions, and running the tab up on the American land to over $25 trillion, the cost in which what exceeds the value of what we're actually worth. That his generation before me and his generation before him could have stopped this from unleashing and getting this far out of hand. But because of their hard-headedness and because of their stupidity, now we are all in peril because of a group of people that basically didn't know their ass from a hole in the ground. Good luck to all of us as we end this message again from the Windmill Ministries, and shalom.
A Category 3 hurricane by our Wednesday. We are worried about storm surge, damaging winds, and flooding rainfall. Out to the north central and Midwest, well, it's hot. 91 in Chicago,